Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Marin Energy Authority Board Meeting for Thursday, May 2nd. Without further ado, let's get right into the agenda. Item 1, board announcements. Doesn't look like we have any this evening. Item 2 is public open time on matters not on the agenda. Okay. Item 3, report from Executive Officer Don.
Great, I just have 3 quick items this evening. I wanted to let folks know that our Green Power Partnership signs have been delivered to most of our cities and towns. All cities and towns receiving the MEA power have been added to the EPA Green Power Partnership website as of now. And if you haven't already received your sign and or you want a formal presentation of the sign at your council meeting, let us know. It's exciting to be able to spread the word about being a Green Power partner. The second item is I wanted to let folks know that our Better Business Bureau certification has been approved. And so we now have the ability to use the Better Business Bureau logo on our marketing material, on our website, etc. And that just provides some additional comfort in our communications with customers. And we're really excited about that. And then the last thing I wanted to report is that one of the projects that is delivering power to us currently had a ribbon cutting on Earth Day on the 22nd of April. One of our staff, Justin Kudo, was able to attend, and it was a really great event where we were able to kind of see the impact that we're making by buying power from a landfill gas facility that would otherwise just be getting flared into the atmosphere and creating CO2 without any benefit. And we're buying about 4 megawatts from this facility now on a regular basis. It started coming in late last year. And we're really excited to have that part of our portfolio. And it's in Lincoln, California, so it's actually not so far. And one day we may want to do a field trip to go out and allow you guys to take a look at that and see how it works from a technical perspective. And that's it for my report.
Great. Any questions for Don? Okay, seeing none. Item 4 is the consent calendar.
I'll move.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Making good progress. Item 5, and sorry for that. We were, yeah, exactly. Item 5 is Deep Green Local Renewable Development Fund.
Okay. Scoot over here so I can see. So this is really an exciting item that we're bringing to you this evening, and it's been talked about at our technical committee and our executive committee. I'm going to kick it off with a little bit of initial information, and then about halfway through turn it over to Greg Brem, who handles our procurement and resources and is actually doing some evaluation of sites. But what we're going to be talking about this evening is there is a good deal of, as we have seen participation grow in our Deep Green program, we've been able to look at ways that we can use that revenue to benefit the agency through local procurement and local build-out. Local build-out is something that's been really of interest to our board and our community since we launched MCE, and with a connection between our Deep Green customers and the local build-out concept. What we want to talk about this evening is the idea of creating a local renewable development fund that would be seeded and funded by our Deep Green customer revenue and then used to pay the pre-development costs for a local project that MCE would build and then own. So just to back up a little bit, in our implementation plan and our business plan going back as far as 2008, one of the things that was always contemplated as a part of the agency was to build and own some of our own assets. That's a way that we can really lock in costs and make sure that we're able to really protect against the fluctuating cost of fossil fuels going into the future. One of the other things that was really important to us at that time in the formative years was looking at ways we could stimulate the local economy and get some local renewables into our jurisdiction. So the creation of a local renewable development fund would be a way to accomplish both of those things while using the Deep Green customer revenue that we're bringing in and being able to create a connection there so that our deep green customers can feel like they're helping to contribute to this local build out. We believe that the interest in the local renewable projects would likely stimulate more interest in the Deep Green program, and so we would use it as a marketing tool to provide more support for more projects in the future. So some of the initial steps that we've taken are looking at sites that might be a possibility for the first local MEA project. And Greg's going to come up in a minute to talk about that, but first I just want to say that the idea here is to walk before we run, as we have with everything else in the agency. We've been buying power from existing supply up until this point, and we're now at a point where we're able to consider building a project that we own at a small scale, see how the experience goes, and then we would likely be able to take additional revenue coming in from additional Deep Green customers and put it into pre-development for other projects after that time. Now, this is not an overnight process. This is something that takes time. There are long timelines involved with getting permits in some cases. There are almost always long timelines involved with getting interconnection approvals and process with PG&E. And so this isn't a project that we would have built anytime this calendar year, but it's something that we could make a lot of progress towards in this calendar year and potentially have it coming online as early as next year or shortly thereafter. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Greg, to talk about the sites that we've identified and the steps.
So over the last couple of months, I've been looking at some different sites within our jurisdiction for both load potential and development sites, trying to mitigate any sort of environmental impacts by using a developed site or a disturbed site. So we've had some pretty good luck finding some sites that are available next to substations that are fairly easy to interconnect. The interconnection process for the size project we're looking at is fairly small. It's for a 1 to 5 megawatt project. That's a simple $500 fee. It's a very fast track process compared to the other processes involved for interconnection. Generally for the price size project too, it's very simple. I think on a 12 kV distribution line, which most of the lines are here, it'll handle a 1 megawatt system fairly easily. So one of the things we need to do, the interconnection applications, is to have site control that we can demonstrate. We have a site plan developed and also electrical engineering single line drawings. So when we get the sites developed, we'll be organizing those through engineers to get them submitted for the interconnection. We'll pre-screen the process for the environmental impacts to minimize those. We'll be trying to avoid any CEQA analysis again by using disturbed sites or developed sites. And then using independent engineers or consultants, or possibly even some consulting agreements with system developers or other companies that are in the solar field that are willing to contribute to the projects. And then we'll submit the interconnection process. Down at the bottom here, you'll see a Gantt chart of a timeline, kind of showing about a month to 2 month process to get through the site screenings, working through the planning folks to get conditional use permits if they are needed, and hopefully trying to avoid the conditional use process. You need the CEQA analysis, engineering. The interconnection itself should only take from 2 to 6 months is the timeline for the fast track process. So that's hopefully the way to work. After that, we can do an RFO for the actual construction and labor portion of the contract, and then move forward hopefully in a few months. So a little over a year to get through the process to get a site online. So we've had some pretty good luck so far. We've taken some referrals from some of the board members, and actually the Port of Richmond identified 2 sites in the port that look like they'll be good initial candidates. One is a building roof that will handle about a 900 kilowatt system, and then a parking lot next door that can handle about a megawatt by itself. So both of those would be good opportunities for a first project with very little disturbance or environmental impacts. So we're looking at some other sites, and we're happy to take any referrals from any of the board members for any other sites that would be interested. With that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Kurt, any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Remind me in megawatt, how many homes is that per year? 800? How many?
Depending on who you're talking to, it's 700 to 1,000 homes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just to explain the timeline a little bit in a little more depth, There are costs associated with pre-development, which is what Greg was just talking about, the getting permits, paying for an interconnection, engineering studies, those sorts of things. And then there actually are costs of getting the project built. And for a 1 megawatt project, that can range anywhere from $3 to $5 million. So the actual finance of the project would happen either through a straight bank loan, a partnership with a commercial entity, which has some benefits because they're able to pull tax credits off of the asset and then transfer ownership to us at a set point in time. A third option would be that we issue a bond, a tax-free bond, which is something we have the ability to do as a government agency. One benefit of going through that approach would allow us to, at the same time, get a credit rating, which could be useful to us at some point. It's something that we want to go through. So those are three options for actually financing the project itself. This local renewable development fund would be established to pay for the pre-development costs that Greg outlined. And that's not as big of a lift. That's not, we're not talking about $3 to $5 million, but we're talking about somewhere in the range of $50 or so thousand. If we were able to, if we wanted to continue to divert funds from our Deep Green program in future years to the Local Renewable Development Fund, which I expect the board would be interested in doing, we can certainly bring it back on a regular basis. We could then have funds to explore and do pre-development for additional projects. I think that's something that if this initial program is a success, then we'd want to do that again going forward. As our Deep Green participation increases, then we'd be able to look at and pre-plan more sites. So it's really up to our customers to help grow the program and help pay for the pre-development costs. And that's kind of exciting to have that sort of relationship with a customer where they can be directly related in helping to impact what happens in the community. One clarification I'd like to make on the recommendation, after some discussions with some of you, it was recommended that we slightly adjust the recommendation, and you'll see that the dollar amount that we have recommended to transfer into this local renewable development fund is set at $52,000, but to use the exact number that would reflect 50% of our Deep Green revenue for 2012, it would actually be $51,536. So that's the amount that we could include in your recommendation this evening if you'd like to transfer funds into that account. I think one last thing I should mention, that this probably would have been a good thing to start with rather than end with, but as you all probably noticed in your packet as part of the consent calendar, there was some adjustments made to the budget that included the creation of a local renewable development fund. So with the approval of the consent calendar, that fund now exists. With your action on this item, we'd be able to put some dollars in that account.
I'll move.
Second.
Any further comment? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Very exciting. And are we gonna, so Don, we're gonna take steps to get the word out to the community on this?
Yeah, we'll be issuing a press release, and this is something that will likely become the focus of our marketing efforts as the Richmond efforts start to diminish. We'll begin to focus on this in our outreach to the press and to the public.
Great, thanks. Item 6 is energy efficiency update and standard offer program.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board. The majority of my update is going to focus on the standard offer program as sort of the hot off the press program development. But there were a few things that I wanted to mention or call attention to that were provided in the packet before I get started. The first thing that I wanted to mention is actually sort of a somber note, more than sort of, it's an extremely somber note. Last month at this board meeting, your board approved a contract with Richmond Build Organization to help fund a workforce development effort in the city of Richmond. And the very first day of the training of the class that we funded saw really horrible tragedy where one of our future trainees was shot and killed on the training site in front of not only the other trainees, but his father and brother, who were also participating in the course as well. So this was really tragic news for all of us. It's been very hard for us to take. I can't even imagine how it must feel for the family and for the fellow trainees. So just wanted to bring everybody's attention to that. I know folks have been very expressive of their sorrow on behalf of the family and the others who had to witness this. And we as staff have banded together to try and send some donations to some organizations in Richmond to express our feelings. But I just wanted to make sure everyone had a moment to remember the tragedy and recognize that was kind of a bad moment. So sorry to start things off on a bit of a downer note, but I thought it was important to recognize. The rest of our program is, I think, really starting to take flight again. My life has gotten very busy, which is a good thing. One thing I can mention is that our small commercial program also this month has started kicking off our canvassing campaign. They've been going door to door in the city of San Rafael, and I wish I could tell you what doors they've been knocking on, but unfortunately I can't get that information yet. But I'm hopeful that we will be able to after a week or so. They have accomplished, as of the time I wrote the staff report, the numbers have increased since then, over 18 energy evaluations for the businesses that they visited, including a handful of whole building evaluations, which is exciting because that's what we're funding them to do. So, or that's the value add that we're bringing to the table, is that they can do more comprehensive evaluations and provide a greater, deeper set of retrofits. So that's been very exciting to see that take off. Another thing I really wanted to highlight is that the Marin City Community Development Corporation has been doing a stellar job with the in-field direct installations on our Marin Housing Authority project. Some of you saw probably the press release that was included with your materials today. That's a really wonderful write-up of the project we're doing with Marin Housing Authority. The folks at Marin City CDC have been able to install shower heads and light bulbs in over 305 tenant units so far. The overall project will be 500. So that's really a fabulous opportunity for them to get some workforce experience and for us to be able to hit the ground with some real implementation in the program. Something I want to call your attention to real quickly is included in your board packet, the brochures that we're handing out to tenants when we go door to door. This gives us an opportunity to educate them about the value of energy efficiency, how when they make behavioral changes, it can really help save them money by saving energy. And in addition to that, it includes some important information about CFLs and how to manage CFLs and dispose of them so that they don't end up in the waste stream in inappropriate ways. Additionally, thanks to our totally awesome Elena, we have been able to translate those materials into Spanish, which is, I think, excellent, so accessible to everybody. So those are just a few of the things that I wanted to highlight. One last thing, we've made some really nice upgrades to the web portal tool. It's now available at myenergy.tool.mcecleanenergy.org. We continue to update it regularly, but it has some really nice features that we've added in the last little bit of time. So if you haven't gone to it, go check it out. All right, and then now to the meat of our discussion. Here to talk about the Standard Offer Program. So the Standard Offer Program is something that this board has discussed a few times. To start things off, I wanted to talk about an overview since the last discussion. Some of this is going to be a repeat because we take, for those of you who are in the technical and executive committee, you've seen some of this material before. But we'll go over the results of the analysis that we've done. We'll talk about some of the other Standard Offer Program results elsewhere in the country. And then very briefly, we'll go over some of the next steps that are before us. So some of the things that we talked about in February when we last had this discussion, both at the board and at the technical and executive committees, was the concept that we could focus a Standard Offer Program on a particular sector. And I should back up and say that a Standard Offer Program in its most essential form is the idea that you have one single standard offer that you make available to everybody. So you would say, we are going to pay 10 cents a kilowatt hour for energy that you can prove you've reduced. And then anyone comes to us with a proposal on how they're going to accomplish that. And as long as it meets the minimum criteria that we would set, we would enter into a contract with them. They would not get paid until they verify that the energy savings they said they would deliver are actually delivered. And at that point, we would pay them the predetermined rate. So that's the concept of a Standard Offer Program, but it can take many different shapes. So we wanted to look at where the most potential was in our service territory. Is it with, and in particular, we had some interest in the agricultural and streetlight areas, and also in the commercial and industrial areas. And I can talk about why we honed in on those in a second. We also wanted to look at how the energy efficiency potential that's in those sectors compares to what programs are available. So it's one thing to say that there's a lot of energy that's used in another sector, but if there's already a program out there that's targeted at accomplishing those energy savings, it doesn't make as much sense for us to try and join the party as well. And then finally, a big question is, how do we design the program to accomplish our objectives? If our objectives are to be as cost effective as possible, if our objectives are to spur innovation, those two things are going to drive a very different program design. So it's important to have that in mind when we embark on the actual design. So we did some interesting analysis to try and figure out where the potential was. We took a year's worth of energy use, electricity use data for across our entire service territory. And let me just point out, not to kick a dead horse, but this is an area where it would be super helpful for us if we actually had access to other kinds of data like gas data, because we could really have a full picture instead of a partial picture. But that point aside, we were able to look at the electricity use in our entire service territory due to data requests that we've been able to make to PG&E. And what we found from looking at our total electricity consumption in the portfolio is that really residential is the dominant portion of our portfolio, but there's also a fairly significant load associated with commercial, being small commercial and large commercial as well. Something that's worth noting is that the residential sector is already served by an existing IOU, Investor-Owned Utility Program, the Energy Upgrade California program. And the Energy Division has advised MEA in our efficiency efforts to avoid duplicating and overlapping existing program offerings. So that would make serving the residential sector somewhat challenging. Additionally, for the small commercial sector, we have a program. So I don't have great interest in competing with my own program out there in the field. So it also kind of sets that aside as not an ideal sector to serve. Something I thought would be interesting to look at is how electricity is used in Richmond, who's about 31% of our load, as it compares to how it's used in the rest of the Marin County area. And as we might suspect, we see a very different profile. Large commercial is very dominant in the Richmond area, as opposed to residential, which is very dominant in the rest of the Marin territory. So that's just kind of interesting to think about. There may be more potential in Richmond in some areas than there might be in Marin. And then something also, because they're a point of discussion, let's see if I can, oh, that's not what I meant to do. Do I have a pointer here? No, okay, well.
There's something in the middle of it.
Haha! Okay, so what I wanted to point out is the streetlight and the agricultural load are tiny little slivers that are represented here and here. So they aren't significant, but we'll talk about them more in a second. So the potential that's available in commercial and industrial. When I say potential, what I really mean is how much energy is being used there. This isn't a super detailed analysis, but what we have been able to find is that commercial and industrial, there's 500,000 kilowatt hours a year that are consumed in those sectors, which is a lot of energy, particularly relative to the rest of our portfolio. As I mentioned, the small commercial program is already, and actually this, I specifically looked at large commercial and industrial. I removed small commercial from this picture. The commercial and industrial programs are served mainly by one program, the Commercial Calculated Incentives Program, which does the majority of efficiency work in these areas. There are other third-party targeted programs that address specific technologies or specific kind of manufacturing processes, for example, but for the most part, the Commercial Calculated Incentive Program is the main player. And that program offers rebates at about, I believe, 8 cents a kilowatt hour and $1 a therm. The project developer is allowed to customize the project as much as they want, and then they can essentially get those calculated rebates based on their estimated energy savings. One thing that I bring that up is because the fundamental concept of the standard offer program is that you're shifting the risk from the program to the customer. You're not saying we're going to pay you a set rebate and assume that you make those energy savings and hope it works out. What we're saying is we're going to pay a set price and you're going to show us that you've gotten those energy savings, and then we're going to pay you. And that's important because if you're shifting the risk, you can't pay less than the rebate program, which essentially assumes all the risk. So thinking about the Commercial Calculated Incentive Program is sort of our price point, about what we have to compete with if we want to expect people to participate in this program. There is some potential opportunity for load shifting to assist with integration of specific large customers as a component of this program. And And there's, as I mentioned, a lot of energy used in the sector, and therefore you think that you can get some significant potential savings. Yeah?
Would you describe a little bit more what you mean when you talk about load shifting?
Certainly. So the concept of load shifting is that when there's one or two customers, or when there's any customer that uses a significant amount of energy, has a large demand, when they bring their equipment online, it's going to cause a huge impact to the grid, because the grid really only has so much capacity at a single point in time. So in terms of having a balanced portfolio and being able to meet all of our customers' needs, it may be to our benefit to help some of those really substantial customers who are going to impact our resource capacity needs shift their load, either by using different technologies, by choosing to use their electricity at a different time of day. There are a lot of different strategies that are embedded in that. One thing that muddies the water when I talk about this as an opportunity is that there is an existing demand response program, which is different than the energy efficiency programs. And the entire concept of the demand response program is to get people to shift load so that they reduce their peak needs, so that when all of Southern California, not to throw anybody under the bus, turns on their air conditioners, the load is able to meet the requirements. So you're able to come up with efficiency strategies, such as replacing technologies that help to reduce load at peak times, but there are also demand response programs that we would have to compete with in that area that pay a pretty good price in order to get those same goals. Wow, I jumped right ahead. Okay, so the potential that's available in agriculture is also something that we looked at. And I should mention that what we've done with these graphs here is we've actually looked at the amount in each of the cities, but because we were running into confidentiality issues with percentage of overall portfolio, we had to actually remove the names. So what you're seeing here is the load available in each of the cities, or the amount of energy that's used in each of the cities by this sector. So we've had to scrub it of some of the information, but that gives you an idea. And what I think why that becomes relevant in this picture when we talk about agriculture is that there aren't a lot of players necessarily in the agricultural sector. The potential, the amount of energy that's used there is orders of magnitude less than in the commercial and industrial sector. Where we were looking at 500 million kilowatt hours, now we're looking at 6 million kilowatt hours that's used on an annual basis. So it's a much smaller sector, as we noticed when we looked at the pie charts. Something that I think is interesting about agriculture and about streetlights is that we're currently cross-subsidizing these rates to a certain extent. And what I mean by that is it's costing us a little bit more energy to serve those loads than we're getting back from the customers in rates. Because it's such a small portion of our overall portfolio, it's not a huge financial impact, but nonetheless it provides an interesting reason for us to look at reducing energy use in those areas. PG&E does offer agricultural rebates. That's sort of an agricultural catalog that they put out that has specific technology-specific rebates. So if you change out this type of boiler, we'll give you a flat amount of money. But they don't have a program, per se, that's geared to that. They don't have a whole program that's designed to come up with strategies for agriculture. And while the commercial calculated incentive program is available for those agricultural customers, it's not necessarily as good of a fit for those customers. It's not designed to serve those customers. It's more designed to serve sophisticated commercial property owners who really understand their processes, know what their options are, and can do complex financial analyses, essentially. So it's something that is a little bit falling through the cracks. Something else that is available to agriculture is a rate schedule that's available through PG&E. They have a specific agricultural rate schedule, which I think provides incentives for time of use and load shifting. The last sector we looked at was the streetlights, and again, this is another sector that we're currently cross-subsidizing, so it's something that I wanted to look closely at. The challenge with streetlights is that the ownership structure can vary from city to city, and that makes a big difference. Many times PG&E actually owns the streetlight infrastructure. In some cases, PG&E owns some of the lights and the city owns some of the lights. And there's just a mix between which lights are owned by who. For those lights that are owned by the customers, PG&E actually offers a pretty good program to upgrade your streetlights. They do bulk purchasing of LED retrofits, so they can actually come in and not just replace the whole lamp post and everything, but they can just replace the head of the lamp where the light bulb is. And because they do this program for every customer in their service territory, they can get some pretty competitive costs through the bulk purchasing. On top of that, when you do shift to the LED streetlight technology through the PG&E program, they offer an alternative rate, which provides a further incentive. So that's going to be a little hard to compete with as well, and because of the complexity of the ownership structure, it can be a little challenging to identify the opportunities. So something that I wanted to bring up just in terms of mitigating expectations, let's say, is a glance at how some of the other standard offer programs across the country are operating. And what you have here on the left-hand side, look at me with my laser pointer, is actually the total resource cost, the TRC, the levelized TRC, the cent per kilowatt hour. That's the way that the CPUC measures cost effectiveness across energy programs. And it's a way of looking at how overall the administrative costs of the program, the incentives of the program relative to the savings, how it comes out. What we're finding is that generally these are pretty competitive rates. 6 to 7 cents a kilowatt hour is a good cost. However, what we're also finding is that the size of these programs is substantially larger than anything that we have the capacity to accomplish right now. 40 megawatts, 6 megawatts being the smallest one up there. That's a lot of energy and a lot of money associated with that. Also worth pointing out is that the contract term on these tends to stretch out into the 10 or 15-year range, meaning you set a contract with somebody and you pay them that agreed upon price for their verified savings over 10 or 15-year time frame. And I am not anticipating for this small of a pilot that level of commitment with customers. So while there have been really impressive results across the country related to what these programs can accomplish, they're accomplishing them with very substantial program sizes, which in turn promote a lot of competition. And they're also doing this over long time periods, which give people security. So I don't think we're in a position to offer either of those things through this small scale pilot. Although if this program does demonstrate success, it's something that we can think about in designing and moving forward. So some of the things I wanted to talk about, I was sort of intimating that we may have some constraints here. The first thing is that we're envisioning about $100,000 for incentives for this program. So that's not a very large program. It's pretty modest in size. That depends on outcome. We do have the ability to shift.
Becky, where do you get that figure from?
So when I am looking at our budgets, we have basically the standard offer program falls under the 4th sub-program, which is the financing pilots. Included in that are the on-bill repayment pilots for the multifamily, the small commercial, and the single-family program, in addition to the standard offer program. And then in the program implementation plan, we've set specific targets of retrofits that we wanted to accomplish through the financing programs. So when we back that out to the amount of money that we need available for those financing programs, we're left with a pretty small amount for the standard offer program. At this point, we have the majority of that funding allocated to be credit enhancements for the financing programs, the multifamily and single family. However, if it turns out that the standard offer program is doing really well and is demonstrating really good results, we can always move funding to that program at a future date. The fund shifting rules for energy efficiency are actually quite broad. They give you the capacity to move up to 15% between program categories. I think it's actually even up to 50% between program categories before you have to file an advice letter. And that's even saying that if you want to move more, you have to file an advice letter and show the commission that that's your intent. So there is the possibility, and within the financing program, we can move as much funding as we want from incentive category to incentive category. There's actually no restriction on that. It's when we move something from financing to multifamily or from small commercial to single family, that's when those rules are triggered. So there's pretty broad authority, which is kind of crazy when you think about the scale of budget that the IOUs have. I mean, that's a lot of money that they can do. Anyway. Another thing to think about is that there's a desire to focus on electricity for this program. Part of that is driven because that's what we have access for the data. But also part of that is because we talked about this pilot in our regulatory filing as being proof of concept for providing resource adequacy contributions. So this goes back to the concept of you need a certain amount of capacity on your grid, and we basically have to buy capacity to ensure, yes, we're going to have enough capacity to serve all of our load. Well, there might be an opportunity to reduce our need to buy capacity if we can demonstrate that we've verified savings that have been achieved, and that will be persistent. So that's one concept of how we can do this pilot. Mm-hmm.
So Becky, if I hear you right, a key concept that you're talking about is the idea of resource capacity, which is a requirement that the CPUC puts on us that in effect says, listen, MEA, you've got a certain number of customers, you have to have a certain amount of energy always available to be able to serve them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that what you're talking, and so that resource capacity is a challenge for us that's shifting all the time. That's one of the many balls on which you have to keep your eye.
Mm-hmm.
So then what you're talking about here is kind of a hedge where the greater the efficiency is that we can accomplish, maybe we can bring those resource capacity requirement numbers down a little bit.
Exactly. So it's important to note that at this point, it would be proof of concept. It's my understanding that we don't even have the regulatory authority at this point to do our own sort of resource capacity allocations. Although I could be wrong about that.
No, we do, actually. We do the forecasting, and so we do the forecasting based on what we anticipate our load to be. So we would be able to include these reductions in our forecast.
Something that is important to bring up is that the language of the original pilot talked about the resource adequacy potentially being a source of funding for this program. That if we can reduce our resource adequacy requirements, then there's this other pot of money that we can draw upon to fund efficiency programs. But the costs are not very substantial in the resource adequacy market relative to what we would have to pay to really drive the market for efficiency. So it could be a supplementary source of funding to help sweeten the pot if we can prove that it's a really viable option in the future. But that's, I think it's fair to assume that it will always be helpful to have efficiency dollars, some sort of subsidy to help drive this program. Something else I mentioned is that there's a limited time frame. I don't anticipate entering into 5+ year contract terms, especially at the size of the pilot that we're looking at. And then finally, because of the direction from the Public Utilities Commission to avoid overlapping with existing programs, there's a need to serve niche markets. Niche? I never pronounced that one right. And then again, this goes back to the point I mentioned about if we're seeking to shift the risk, we need to outpay relative to the existing rebate programs. We need to present a more attractive offer to the customer. So it's not all bleak. I think that there are also some opportunities inherent in the fundamental characteristics of this. One of them is that given our small size, I think there really is an opportunity to target the gaps that aren't major contributors. And for example, I think agriculture rises to the top as a real good fit for this potential program. The reason I say that is if we had a huge pot of money and we went out with a large standard offer program, it would attract a lot of attention from the major players who are prepared, like mainly energy service companies and others who are prepared to come make a bid for that kind of a program. Given a small size, it may drift under the radar of some of those larger folks and may allow some new room for people who haven't been participating in this. Another thing is that we can set prices based on the program competition. So when we're dealing with a small market, we have a better idea of who we need to beat. So that gives us an opportunity to really set our price against another competitor. Performance guarantees mean that and by performance guarantees, I mean the fact that we don't pay until we see that the savings are going to be there. That means that even a small test case can contribute significantly to our portfolio. If we set a price, for example, 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which is 2 cents more per kilowatt hour than the competitive program, $100,000 means a megawatt, 100,000 megawatt hour, a million kilowatt hour savings. So that is fairly exciting to think about it in those terms. And then again, to sort of reiterate a point to say differently, the smaller size of the program can also create opportunity for smaller contractors. Which I think is something that can be really attractive about that. And that's something that we can support in program design as well, by setting limits on how much of the overall program could be done by one contractor. So we could say, for example, no one contractor can take more than 50% of all the available funding, and the rest is available for other people. So that's an example of how objective would drive design. The next steps on this, I had been talking with the folks at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab about what the picture looks like here, what we're thinking, where the opportunity is, where our constraints are, et cetera, and they had some really good ideas. They had indicated that because of the small size of the program, a formal RFP process might not make as much sense because it's so administratively burdensome for the folks who are bidding into the program relative to the amount of opportunity they have available. So what they suggested might be interesting for us to do is to solicit technical advice in the program design from community advocates and project developers, whether that happens through an RFI or RFO process, or whether that's something that's more informal through a series of publicly noted technical committees that we convene to provide information. I think that that's something that we're open to. We could use those opportunities to determine such things as the potential technologies that we would want to include or exclude, the price that we would be willing to set relative to competition, what contract length makes sense for us and for them, and then importantly, the evaluation, measurement, and verification framework. This is a key part of the program. As I've said over and over again, we don't pay until we know the savings are there. How do we know the savings are there? That's the E&D component of the program. So that's pretty important for us to determine as well. And that may look different depending on who we invite to the table. For example, whether we ask them to accomplish that or whether we bring on a third party to accomplish that. We have revised our program implementation plan to reflect some of these main takeaways. And then the next step after all that, again, would be to draft an RFI or an RFO. I think that fall would be the right time frame to issue something like that, and we can aim for a spring implementation of projects. So I believe that was the end, and I'm available to answer any questions.
So how would the standard offer price be arrived at?
The standard offer price essentially would be, there's two ways that we can do it. One way is to just blank set the price relative to the competition in the marketplace. And I think if we did that, 10 cents per kilowatt hour would be about the right place to land. I have arrived at that conclusion based off of analysis of a lot of the other PG&E programs that pay around 8 cents a kilowatt hour for the calculated custom incentives, so it would beat that a little bit. Additionally, I think it would be the right amount relative to the size of what we would want to accomplish for savings. And that's the other side of the coin is that we need to conduct E3 analysis. E3 is the technical calculator that underlies the energy savings estimates in the CPUC programs. It calculates how cost effective your program is for their metrics. So another way to do it would be to say, how much can we pay and still be cost effective under that framework? Either way though, I think 10 cents is about the right place for us to land. 6 or 7 is about our avoided cost. 6 cents or 7 cents a kilowatt hour is about our avoided cost. So it's a little more than our avoided cost, but again, it beats the competition. And it's not paying too much so that we're significantly overpaying our avoided cost.
Director Sims.
So Becky, I think it's a great idea to get community advocates and project developers involved in the design. I think that'll really enhance the creativity and thoughtfulness of this project. So thank you for including that. I'm looking forward to seeing that piece going forward.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
You know, assuming that you go ahead and develop this at some point, I'd like to see a little more specific hypothetical case study. I mean, I think I kind of understand this, but when you're talking about the agriculture sector, for example, what are you talking about? Dairies and vineyards and chicken farms and things like that. It'd be nice to just take something hypothetical, you know, Farmer Brown raises free-range chickens, and here's how it's going to work, and here's how the money, you know, how the transactional stuff works, and how it comes out in the end. I'm not quite there.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think too that in large part that would be the value of inviting some of the community members to participate in this, is to identify where their challenges and opportunities are. Agriculture is a pretty broad brushstroke. It could be everything from free range to crops to dairy. There's a lot of different mechanical processes involved in each of those. I mean, farming, you're going to be looking at pumping and irrigation. Dairy, you're probably going to be looking at heating due to like pasteurization and such. So I think it's a really good point to allow the community in some sense to help us drive our thinking on this.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, well, get to work, Becky. I think Director Butt's comments are good, and if we can kind of develop a case study of how this would work, that would be very helpful.
Thank you.
I think that was, is that an action item, Don?
No, that's a discussion only.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any members of the public, any questions on that matter? Okay, we'll look forward to hearing more about it. Item 7, communications update.
Great, so we have, Jamie is out sick and wants to be here but can't. So in her place, we have a very well-equipped replacement here, Alex, who's going to give us a communications update. Thank you, Alex.
Hello, members of the board. Big shoes to fill with Jamie being gone, but bear with me here. We're going to throw at you a couple of lists of a lot of the outreach that we've been doing recently, events both in Richmond and in Marin, throughout the service area. I warn you, it's somewhat Richmond heavy, just because of where we're at right now with the outstretch in Richmond. We'll start first with the business outreach, because this is actually some of the best stuff. I'm just going to point out to a couple of the events on each of these pages, but if you have any questions, please just feel free to interrupt me. I want to point out here with the business outreach is the Council of Industries. We presented to them in mid-April and had a really warm reception. Greg joined me for that meeting, and I was a little nervous going into it because I figured we'd get some tough questions, and we did. But all in all, it was a really good reception. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that our commercial rates are cheaper right now, so that certainly doesn't hurt. And I think a lot of the members that were present really appreciated the value of what MCE can do for their corporate social responsibility when it comes to being light green or deep green. 50 to 100% renewable is something that a lot of them see the value in. In fact, it went so well that the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce invited us to come speak at their event in June. Down here we have just some of the media briefings that we've done lately. I won't go into any detail on those, but if you have questions about that towards the end, feel free to chime in there. We've been meeting with some organizations that are involved with schools, especially one of our sponsors, with the Mindful Life Project. One of the reasons why we decided to work with the Mindful Life Project was because we saw the public schools in Richmond as a really valuable avenue for reaching the population, reaching parents, reaching homes. So that has paid off really well. Our name is getting out there. If you go to the Mindful Life website, you'll see that our logo is prominently featured there as one of the largest sponsors. I also want to point out that the places of worship, I know this looks like a thin list, but that is changing. First, a lot of the houses of worship that we've been reaching out to have been Spanish-speaking churches, which is going to be on a different list for our Spanish outreach. So Elena has done an incredible job at reaching a broad swath of different organizations and people, but particularly in the houses of worship. Elena is blessed with the ability to connect with people very quickly and build instant rapport with people, and that's really paid off well for our outreach purposes. And she is, like the rest of the staff at MCE, she's fearless and she's tireless, and that's really paying off. In fact, I think she did 4 presentations in one day on last Sunday at churches and stuff, so it's she's kind of raising the bar for us. So,
200 people in each presentation.
Yeah, I think Elena single-handedly addressed like 1,000 people on a Sunday.
She said she felt very godly.
So you'll see on the Spanish-speaking outreach list some of those churches, but I want to point out here that these are 2 African-American churches, and we did an initial push to get some speaking events there at some of these churches, and it was difficult, and I think part of that was my fault because when I would speak with people, I think I was coming across a bit too much as a salesman. I think I was giving the hard sell a little bit too hard, and so that kind of creates some suspicion because I don't think a good pastor or reverend necessarily wants to unleash a salesman onto their flock. So, but that's changing now in part because the community leader advisory group that we convened had a couple of people with connections to the churches, and they have been really impressed with a lot of the information they've received. And I'll also point out that some of them were skeptics, to say the best. And now one of them, in fact, she admitted to us that she's not sure she's going to opt out anymore. after hearing all of this information. So she got us a presentation at her church, and so now I think we're able to actually get more of these types of presentations in some of those churches. There's a big one coming up, the Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church. Next Wednesday is going to be a great one. The Reverend there, Alvin Bernstein, is really well known and highly regarded. He's a big proponent of public health, and he's a big fan of the mayor and Director Butt. So we're going to be in good hands there, and we're really looking forward to that. Yeah.
A lot of the churches in Marin City have, and people like Makin Hassan of the CDC, have direct connections to churches in Richmond as well. So you might, with the connections you already have in Marin City, you might be able to leapfrog over some of this.
Thank you. That's a
Yeah.
great suggestion. We'll definitely pursue that. Yeah, I think it reminds me of the book of Matthew, that the meek shall inherit the earth. We want to make sure that the earth they inherit is a sustainable one, thriving. Here's just another list of a couple other events. I don't want to take up all your time trying to see which of these would be the most relevant. Unless there are any questions, I'm just going to move on to the next list. Neighborhood councils and homeowners associations. We've been roaring through the neighborhood councils. Ben and I have been presenting to a lot of those, which are always fun. You never know what you're going to get, but by and large, we get a good reception. Same thing with the HOAs. We've got more HOAs to reach in the future. This is one of our long-range targets because there are several different homeowners associations in Richmond that we want to reach. Here's what I was talking about before, about the Spanish outreach. I really have to give credit to your directors because they've really been forward-thinking when it comes to the English as a second language. And since between 29 and 39% of the population in Richmond speaks Spanish as a first language, this has been really key for our outreach. Especially the ESL classes. We hear some of the churches. Cinco de Mayo is going to be a lot of fun on Sunday. If you guys want to see a fun Cinco de Mayo festival, you should come over to Richmond on Sunday. We'll be there, by the way. So I want to highlight these two events right here. We were asked by one of the city council members in Richmond to make sure that we had town hall style meetings where the public could come and ask their questions. And so we're doing that. In fact, we had the first one on Earth Day. And your executive director and Director Tom Butt and the mayor and several other people addressed the crowd. It was well attended, and I think by and large it was considered a success. So that's a huge milestone for us. But just as there are mountains beyond mountains, there are milestones beyond milestones, and we've got a Spanish language community event that's going to be coming up on the 13th. And let's see. Oh yes, the Asian Pacific Environmental Network just invited us to co-host an event in June. That's going to be a clean local energy available now event. So we're building great relationships with some of the organizations that are in Richmond right now. Senior citizen outreach. There are a lot of senior citizens in Richmond, and so we've made a concerted effort to address them, especially because they don't necessarily use the internet quite as much as some other demographics. So we've presented to the Sons in Retirement, but we're also going to be presenting to the Richmond Commission on Aging on the 10th. And we expect this to be a well-attended event. They're expecting between 150 and 200 people to come to that. Yes?
Yeah, so I have a question. Is this like a politician with a standard stump speech, or do you have
Is this repetitive?
do you tailor it to the group? Do you bring in different materials depending on how's all that work?
Yeah, well, we have like a standard like slideshow that we give, but we definitely customize it for each group to the extent that we know how to. At the end of our slideshow, we have like some reserve slides that we can go to really fast if people ask certain questions, like net energy metering. I try not to put that in like the first run because it tends to confuse people, but guaranteed someone's going to ask about it, and so you can hit it during the Q&A. But no, for the most part, we try to tailor it to the groups that we're meeting with. More on emphasis, though, than anything else. So let's see. Moving on. Advertisements. Jamie's done an amazing job at reaching the most important periodicals, both print and online, in Richmond. We've got half page, quarter page, and full page ads in Pulse, the Post, also the Richmond Confidential. Redeemed World is a Richmond-based media organization. They have Redeemed World Magazine and redeemedworld.org, and their focus is on the urban progressive community. The Post is probably one of the most highly regarded African-American newspapers in the country. And there was we've had some great ads I'm going to show you in just a second in that. And it was interesting, on one page we had our half-page ad, and on another, in the most recent one, there was PG&E's half-page ad. And I think ours really took the cake, because you could tell that we had real people from the community in the ads, and not just stock photos. I'll show you those right now. This is one of our, he's a member of our community leader advisory group. This is Damian King. He is the publisher of Redeemed World Magazine and redeemedworld.org. He's also a member of our community leader advisory group. Really compelling person. I think I've told you about him before. But his slogan, "Change Begins with Choice," is being repeated by a lot of people these days. And this is one of our newer ads that Jamie and Green and I put together. Speaking of the folks who are going to inherit the earth someday, there's one of them right there. And this is obviously with Richmond Bill. We found that trying to angle the conversation with whatever constituency group towards the future is very helpful. Sometimes people want to get into a hot debate about what our energy resources are today versus what the PG&E's resources are today. But the important thing that we try to remind folks is that in the next 25 years, California's population is going to grow from 33 million to 50 million, and decisions will be made on how to supply that future demand. And that's really where the conversation should be directed, is towards the future. I think you've seen this before. This is our deep green, one of our deep green champions in Richmond, Timber Manhart at the Catahoula Coffee Shop. And this certainly raised eyebrows in good ways at the Council of Industries meeting, because they were all looking at that, they're all seeing themselves in this ad. And it was worth reminding them that, by and large, it now costs less in Richmond to be 100% renewable than to be USDA organic. There's something for them to consider. And this is going to be this ad actually hasn't been published yet, but it's going to be coming out soon. This is Dory Robinson of Urban Tilth with her mother and one of her twin daughters. So that's 3 generations of Richmond endorsing MCE. And again, this is not a stock photo. These are real people. These are real advocates. And also just really cool people. The Urban Tilth is an amazing organization.
Should be on which we rely.
Urban
prepositions.
Thank you. All that money, all that student debt for nothing, huh? Our very own cover girl and account manager, Ben Choi, was also featured in one of our ads. This is probably my favorite. Opt-out notices have gone out. That is the first batch. So the first 2 in April have gone out. There's going to be a 3rd one coming out this month. And then the next 2 through July and August. Right now, we're looking at about a 5% opt-out rate, which stings to me a little bit, but I'm told that's not so bad.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's way better.
Yeah, also, but this is also balanced by the fact that we've seen an uptick in deep green enrollments.
That's great.
According to Ashley and Justin, our deep green enrollments, we've got about a dozen a week at this rate, a lot of them coming from Richmond. So I think in Richmond we're really starting to see effectiveness, which is translated both in that there are some people who are opting out and making the right decisions for their values and for their bottom lines, presumably, and then there are other folks who are deciding to opt up. And so that's just, I think, evidence that we are reaching people.
Are we making a specific pitch on deep green over there?
Yeah, that you should do it. we definitely are. We're definitely making to whenever we say that you have we're talking about options. And one of the messages that I think has been most effective is to tell people that we're here to tell you what your choices are, not to tell you what choices to make. And so you're welcome to opt out if that's what you feel you should do. But on the other hand, you're also welcome to opt up. So we kind of try to counterbalance the opt up and the opt out. And then with the businesses, I feel like the pitch for the deep green can really hit home because there's a lot of added value to that, a lot of really surplus capital that through paying your utility bill, you can advertise as 50% or even 100% renewable, and that's not necessarily available to all businesses. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So we saw in Becky's slide earlier that a large percentage of the energy use in Richmond is large commercial customers. Have you reached out to your considerable salesmanship skills to the top 10 or 20 big users on a direct basis?
We are to a certain extent. The Council of Industries actually had some of those large users right in the room. I think that's why also it felt more comfortable to be there, that business people don't mind salespeople as much. I think that we are still doing direct outreach to some of those large users, and we will continue to do so. And one of the issues has been that since we don't offer peak date pricing, so there were some concerns about that, but actually we're finding that peak day pricing hasn't been the boon that a lot of these industrial and commercial users thought it was. So that's been it's just a rich area for conversations. And yeah, we definitely want to reach out to those commercial areas. That's something I'm personally really excited about.
Well, I know there are separate meetings with a lot of vendors, yeah.
So I had a general question about that when it comes to some of the very large commercial users. If they were to opt into the Deep Green program, would they be able to take a rec credit going forward, as a tradable credit that they could use as a difference between, say, the deep green price and the light green price that could be used on the exchange, on the power, on the tradable exchanges that are forming now? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, well, the rec that's associated with any renewable generation goes to MCE. So it doesn't go to the customer. But they're able to claim the product they get from us as a renewable product. If they are reporting with the climate registry or some other entity, they're able to use our product in the same way they might use a rec. So it's a similar outcome for them, but the transaction is handled by us.
It's fairly cost intensive for someone to have an account with Regis to own RECs themselves, and maybe about $200 a year. So most customers are not going to be able to get enough RECs to make that make sense.
Any further questions or comments? Yes.
Hey, Alex, bang up job. Nice job.
Oh, thanks.
Do you understand that 5% opt-out rate? Marin's like 20. So like,
For now.
Yeah, I don't care.
We're going to unleash out.
The 5% is like stellar. It's like A+ work. Nice job. Nice job.
It's not over yet. Still gotta get to the fall. Still gotta get through July.
It's a great lead-in for regulatory.
Well, and just to note, one key fact, has the first bill come out yet for Richmond?
I don't think so. No,
All
we're not.
right, we're going to talk to you after that.
I don't care. I see 5% now. I'm thrilled. I think that's great.
No, it is great. It's
I mean, for those of you who haven't been through an enrollment before, it's just worth mentioning that it's a long process, and we're at the beginning of it, and we don't get up into the 20% typically until we're past the time where they're getting bills, seeing their bills, and then making a decision. So seeing this low opt-out rate now is wonderful, but it also it's likely that we'll see it to continue to increase over the next few months. And not that we are going to lay down and let that happen. We're going to do everything we can to keep people excited about the product, but we're likely to see that inch up quite a bit in the next few months.
I think there might have been some questions from the public.
I was just curious if we knew what the percentage of opt-up was. Do you know what that translates to?
I actually don't know. I don't know.
It's we can say that it is higher than we saw in Marin initially, so that's really exciting to see. But we can bring back some specific information to the next meeting. But we have been seeing a higher uptick than we anticipated compared to Marin.
And what we have seen in the past is when we do specifically market around that, it makes a difference.
So what is the full arc of the beginning of rollout to when the opt-out time before notice goes out and they've gotten their first and then their second bill? What's the arc starting and then finishing?
So enrollment is going to be in July. So they started getting opt-out notices, or what I like to call enrollment notices,
Very good.
in April.
Right.
And so now people can start opting out starting in April.
Right.
Enrollment is actually in July, but
Right.
people don't necessarily notice that.
Right.
And then I kind of count it as, since the next 2 months, they could opt out without getting that one-time administrative fee of $5 or $25. So I think that takes us to September. This is the full arc. That's when we can really like to take a deep sigh of relief and then start trying to get people to opt back in.
Any further public comment? Yes.
Well, I guess because it's in the communications area, one, I think this is all fabulous, I love it. I found a little techno-weedy error in in the brochure that you got in there for tenants, so see me, just step outside. You got it.
Techno meeting.
You, Bob. I have one other thing to add on this item, if I might, and it's there's a article before you that's from the Pacific Sun. Marin City Public Housing Goes Green, and it's really exciting to see this piece that came out in the Pacific Sun. I think it hit late last week or early this week, but it's highlighting the Marin Housing Authority partnership with MCE and the Marin City Community Development Corporation on the big energy efficiency construction project that we're a part of. So we're really excited about that and great to see some good press about it.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for your good work.
Thank you.
For the report. Okay, item 8, regulatory update.
We have the regulatory cheering section this time. We have the entire regulatory team, which consists of the 3 of us. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a recently submitted filed settlement at the Commission. This is in a proceeding that's been ongoing. It's called the PG&E Green Option proceeding. Initially, as envisioned, the PG&E Green Option was filed as an application along with some PG&E testimony that proposed to have a REC-based green energy product. This settlement actually reflects a significant departure from that original application, and so I just wanted to bring it to your attention and note the issues that we're going to be raising in this proceeding. So again, the proposed settlement was filed on April 11th, and so this is really sort of mid-stride in this proceeding. There's quite a long ways to go here. Our comments are going to be due on May 13th. Just so you know who the settling parties are, again, it's the applicant, PG&E, the Utility Reform Network, which is a consumer advocacy group. We have Q, which is essentially the PG&E unions. We have Sierra Club and the California Clean Energy Committee, and then we have various minority groups that are all settling parties. So what is the green option that they're proposing? So this would be a competitive product that PG&E would offer on sort of the green front. So this is no longer unbundled RECs. This would be a in-state renewable product that is primarily they're looking at solar. And the way that it's structured actually is a little bit unusual insofar as in the initial years, PG&E would just use renewable energy contracts that PG&E already has in place and energy from those pre-existing contracts to serve these customers. So in a way, these customers are paying a premium for a product that already exists. In future years, they would build out or enter into new contracts for solar. Just so you have a sense of the scale of the project, this is not a pilot scale. This is a pretty significant scale project based on sort of the energy on sort of an energy scale of this. It would be about half the size of Marin Energy Authority. So that's the size of it. And then if there are not enough customers to buy the energy under the program, they're proposing to use bundled customers as their backstop. So one of the key problems that we see here is that the green option customers just wouldn't pay the full cost of being a participant of this program, other non-participating ratepayers would bear certain costs of this program. That means that what we're looking at under this application is a subsidized renewable product. So first, I think we should just take a look at what the actual costs are of this product. So first is just your usual sort of plain vanilla. If you're getting your energy from PG&E, you're getting these things: energy, RA. You're paying for overhead, line losses, and other costs. And then in addition, if you sign up for the green option, there would be some additional renewable costs, since you're going to be getting it from a renewable product, which is more expensive than getting brown power. And then there is the cost of just running the program itself. And so I'm simplifying the costs that are laid out in this because we don't yet have the full set of information, so I can't provide you good figures. So, but what would the green option participants pay? So there's a subsidy here. So they would pay for energy and RA costs. They would not pay for overhead, line losses, or other costs, and they would pay for extra renewable costs and program overhead. Well, so the problem is somebody has to pay for those costs. One of the issues that we're seeing is, often we see this cross-subsidization issue happen from the PG&E request that certain costs be allocated to distribution customers, so generation customers pay an artificially low rate. This is actually a little bit of a twist on that, where other generation customers would be paying the cost of this program. This sort of runs into this same sort of, is this a fair playing field? If is this subsidized renewable product going to encourage the availability of other green products? Okay. So when we're looking at what these actual costs are, what was recently reported in California energy markets is that the all-in gen cost for participants of this program would be 11.5 cents per kWh. Just to give you a sense, Clean Power SF is looking, well, they're changing their program structure, so a little bit. They have a couple of options before them, but one of the options for this sort of bundled renewable product would be about 14.6 cents. So I think that 14.6 is a good point of reference for what sort of the all-in costs of, actually, bearing the cost of, 100% renewable at this time are. And obviously we hope that renewable costs come down so that we can meet our own goals of getting up to 100%. So that gets us to where we are in the proceeding, because obviously we're extremely interested in having lots of renewable products available to customers. And so we just want to make sure that this, if it's a subsidized option, it may be to the detriment of other opportunities. So we just want to make sure that participants in this program are paying full costs, and that the participants in this program aren't causing other customers to bear these additional costs, whether it's folks who might not have the interest in being a green option subscriber, or who simply don't have the financial means to be a green option subscriber. And then the second component that we will be likely to raise is the issue about, how do we ensure that this is going to be used in a fair manner? And the issue here is just that, PG&E, as we had discussed in our last meeting, wants to preserve their right to market against CCAs. And this sort of gets to the original point where you want to make sure there's a wide range of green options out there. So this should be used as a tool to increase renewables, not to, for example, thwart green CCAs. So we just want to make sure that it's used in a positive manner and not as sort of a sword against other opportunities and ideas that people want to try out to increase renewables. And that would include things that we support, such as the SEED program. It would include other green CCAs. It would include other build-outs and opportunities to really bring more green energy out to the grid. So those are the main points that we're probably going to be raising there, but there are a lot of issues of law and policy that are going to be raised by it, and I know that this is you know, an interesting topic based on, you know, we really led the way on the green front, and I think that, you know, the various IOUs' interests in having these programs is really, you know, did we cause it? No, but, you know, I think that we've sort of lit a fire to get people moving on this front, and now we're seeing what those potential results, you know, might be. And it's worth noting that San Diego Gas and Electric is also looking at 2 different programs. There's more of a pilot scale programs, and they're quite a bit more fleshed out than what's been proposed up here in the PG&E service territory. And so I think that the 2 concurrent proceedings will be able to inform the other, and also I understand that Southern California Edison will be filing an application with the Commission for their own green product later this year. So do folks have questions on that?
I can make a comment. I think your comments are well taken, that it is important to distinguish between the fact that we do support competition, particularly in other 100% renewable options. In that sense, it is a good step moving forward that PG&E is going in this direction. On the other hand, we do want to make sure that as they're doing so, that they're not using non-participant revenues to, in effect, subsidize their program. That would create an anti-competitive advantage. Interestingly, as you know, but for the benefit of the group, there's a proposed piece of legislation now in Sacramento that deals with the PG&E proposal, as well as the settlement that is at issue now before the PUC. I was up in Sacramento yesterday for a couple other things. I met with the staff of the author of the bill and raised that very issue, so they're very well aware of it and seem receptive to language that would address that issue. So
yeah, and you know, one of the ideas that we've toyed with is to try to request that there be more coordination between these proceedings. I think that the way that the process has been driven has really been driven by the IOUs to date. And usually when you see big policy changes like this, it's really driven by the commission, for example, through rulemaking. And so you end up with consistent legal and policy determinations, and then it gets implemented through various applications of the investor-owned utilities. And so there's more consistency. And so I think that, you know, we're not in that position right now. There's staggered proceedings going on. So, you know, I think that what we would aim to see is to not slow down the processes of these applications, but just endeavor to get all the different proceedings on the same page on the legal and policy matters, so that there's at least statewide consistency. Well, again, not trying to slow down the application, just making sure they're well thought out. I think that you know, one of the issues that we're running into in the PG&E one is, you know, customarily when you file an application, there's substantial testimony and work papers that go along with this. In this case, it's about a 20-page settlement that doesn't really have any parameters around it, so you can't determine its reasonableness. And so, you know, the next steps that we'll be looking at is just asking for that testimony and seeing, you know, where these costs are really coming from, trying to determine the scale of the matter. We have filed discovery requests already on this settlement. So I think that we're going to be getting better information in the future, and I think it'll be really interesting to see, you know, what results from this. I think, you know, one of the interesting things that's happening down in the San Diego territory is they have 2 different proposals, and they're sort of pilot and scale. So there's a way to sort of try out a couple of different alternatives and options for customers. So we'll see how that, you know, we'll see how all those sort of you know, pan out in the coming months. I don't think hard to say when exactly this is going to get resolved because there's so much outstanding in this proceeding.
Questions? Comments? Members, are you, is that your only item that you're?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on the regulatory front. What we have in the coming month, I think that it will be a more opportune time to bring you an update on a couple of the other matters. One, a couple of key items that are coming up is first, there's going to be testimony in the phase 1 of the PG general rate case, and in this proceeding, we're addressing a lot of the cost shifting issues, the usual cost subsidization issues that we're running into, which is that we're seeing sort of distribution customers bearing more costs than they should, resulting in a subsidized generation rate. And so we will have testimony on that this coming month. Also, PG&E General Rate Case Phase 2 has been filed, which means that that is the rate design portion of the proceeding. There's going to be quite a significant revamp of rates that PG&E customers are going to be seeing, structural changes, but we have some sort of more operational specific issues that we're going to be raising because there's a lot of folks involved on, the interested groups for residential ratepayers and commercial ratepayers and agricultural ratepayers and, solar customers that, we serve all of those customers. So, we're gonna see how all those play out. We just want to make sure that there's sort of fair rate design, and then we want to raise a couple of specific structural issues that need to be resolved so that CCAs don't have adverse impacts based on some interactions of different rate components, like the conservation incentive adjustment can sometimes cause consequences in how a bill is calculated that, we think that there are pretty easy ways to fix that, and now's the time to go through that process. But again, those are sort of upcoming components. And actually one more item that I would like to discuss, which again is working its way through the process in the long-term procurement plan. We are going through the process of providing comments on the CAM issue, which we discussed last week, cost allocation mechanism, that's sort of the pass-through of resource adequacy costs to CCA customers. And we've provided some really excellent comments. Jeremy did an excellent, actually it was Jeremy and Sean, he did an excellent job drafting on it, and we had a lot of work on that done by John DeLessie, who's obviously really experienced in rate design. So I think that we're going to, based on the feedback that we've received, we should be seeing some good movement forward on the CAM front. But again, a lot of these are sort of premature to report, but presentation on one topic does not mean that we're not incredibly busy on the others. So,
well, great, thank you. Members of the public, any questions?
Come on. No? Okay.
Well, you're perfectly clear tonight.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, so item 9, board member and staff matters.
I like the shirt.
Yeah, Brian, you were eyeballing that.
Is that new? Is it new?
I forgot to mention in my efficiency update, I meant to point that out. We were partially motivated to get that so that our crew in the field has like the MCE logo, so that they can be identified, but it was a nice adder that the staff got to wear.
I think maybe the board.
Speaking of our crew.
Yeah.
We are
The Warriors.
A couple of questions.
Speaking of our crew.
Yeah.